NBS for Resilience and Biodiversity. My name is James Dalton. I'm the head of Water and Land Management in IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. Nature-based solutions are one of those topics that bridges multiple of the silos that we've sort of self-created. It deals with water, it deals with biodiversity, and it deals increasingly with both climate change mitigation, adaptation. The mixing of those together in a strategic framework to be able to get multiple benefits from one or two interventions is critical to be able to achieve anywhere near the SDG 2030 targets, but also going on further than that to achieve the carbon benefits that we're all searching for. I'm very happy to run this session to start with this morning. We have some high-level speakers. We have a series of chances to be able to get some case studies and understand a little bit more about what's going on around this space. But also, I think increasingly with the policy frameworks that are coming up over the course of the next 6 to 7 months, we have the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, we have CBD COP, and we have the UNFCCC COP27. There is the chance now to be able to collate and understand the messages, scale them in a way that is speaking politically to those conventions and influence the agenda increasingly. For us in IUCN, obviously CBD is critically important in terms of the role of water and biodiversity. And in that conversation, it's increasingly difficult to be able to get water understood between an oceans and a terrestrial agenda. And one of the key things is about the connectivity of freshwater ecosystems for biodiversity for people, and importantly, what that means from a climate perspective. Now, I don't want to talk too much. I'm certainly not the person who should be speaking up here today. What I want to do is to introduce you to our opening speaker. Then we have a second speaker, and then we'll go on to some of the more interactive sessions of the day. First of all, I'd like to introduce Dr. Tanja Rodiger-Verwerk. She's the Deputy Director General at the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development in Germany, and she's been leading Directorate on Global Health, Resilience, and the Equality of Opportunity. And I'd like her to take the stage, please, and give us her opening speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. The Assistant Secretary Monica Medina, the Deputy Executive Director of the Nile Basin, Dr. Michael Kieser, dear James Dalton. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. While Europe faces heat waves with raging forest fires and low water, is one of the hottest summer this year ever recorded. Yesterday I read since 1951, so this is quite long after the Second World War. Severe droughts in Eastern Africa are exacerbating the already existing food crisis, and heavy floods destroying critical infrastructure, homes and livelihoods. So each year is more uncertain. We have polycrisis, and extreme events threaten safe water supply and sanitation, and unfortunately claim lives. Most anthropogenic activities are based on water availability, and the largest urban areas were founded and evolved alongside aquatic ecosystems like rivers, lakes, and coastal wetlands. The water quality of these ecosystems is crucial for water security on the one hand, and biological diversity on the other. These are at the same very foundation of human being, of human well-being and livelihoods. So ecosystem degradation caused by environmental pollution and land use change is damaging and endangering life both above and underwater, and thus preventing the provision of basic ecosystem services such as water storage, nutrient retention, or carbon sequestration. Although freshwater ecosystems cover only 1% of our planet, they are home to 10 percent of all species worldwide. From the top predator hippo, recently discussed to be added to the red list of the world's most endangered animals, across migrating fishes, species to riparian plants and insect larvae are at the basis of the aquatic food web. Since 1970, the diversity of freshwater populations has declined by 84%. 84%. So I wrote my thesis about that in 1985. And I was really thinking yesterday when I read these numbers, it's incredibly dangerous. But freshwater ecosystems are vital for life on Earth. We all know this. Firstly, while forests are the lungs of our planet, wetlands may be considered as Earth's kidneys. With the highest mitigation potential of all ecosystems, they filter water and recycle nutrients. Storing more carbon than any other ecosystem, wetlands ought to be an integral part of the NDCs, the National Determined Contributions. Second, rivers are the Earth's bloodstream for connectivity. They provide drinking water, irrigation water for crop production, and act as significant corridors for the movement of plants, animals, and nutrients. And third, lakes are the planet's spleen, storing and cleaning water. They can ease the impact of floods and droughts by retaining water and releasing it when needed. They also help to replenish groundwater, enhance water quality, conserve biodiversity, and ensure human livelihood and well-being. Protecting intact freshwater ecosystems and promoting a sustainable use of their services are therefore key priorities of German Federal Ministry's economic and for my ministry, and we are the BMZ, the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And at the same time, my ministry is increasingly committed to promote biodiversity-friendly and socially responsible restoration of ecosystems worldwide by focusing on nature-based solutions as part of an integrated resource management. It becomes evident biological biodiversity, climate change, and environmental pollution are inextricably linked through water. The triple planetary crisis is a water crisis at its core. Therefore, limiting global warming to ensure a habitable climate and protecting biodiversity are mutual supporting goals. We must urgently turn the tide together and increase our collective cross-sectoral efforts for SDG 6, 12, 13, and 14, and as well 15, biodiversity. Nature-based solutions create important synergies for achieving the goals and targets of the Paris Agreement, the anticipated Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and the 2030 Agenda. Nature-based solutions act as a bridge to overcome the most pressing issues we are facing, confronted by the triple planetary crisis. When implementing nature-based solutions, we must follow a holistic approach to balance trade-offs between climate change objectives, biodiversity conservation, economic constraints, and social welfare. Nature-based solutions must come with sound social and environmental safeguards. Also, indigenous people and local communities must be specially recognized as strategic partners and right holders when implementing nature-based solutions. Moreover, in cities, nature-based solutions deliver multiple benefits. Blue-green solutions and hybrid infrastructure are often more economic in implementation, but they harness the interrelationship between vegetation and the water cycle to improve living conditions in cities and create a positive effect on biodiversity, climate change adaptation and mitigation, as well as human health. So with this, the water sector is our largest bilateral climate adaptation sector. We are working in many countries on this sector. And since 2013, Germany has furthermore supported the implementation of the Convention of Biological Biodiversity in partner countries with more than 500 million euros annually and 400 million provided through the BMZ. Through a holistic approach to water resource management, we promote water security, climate resilience, and biodiversity worldwide. And due to the continent's high vulnerability, confronted by the triple planetary crisis, our work has mainly focused on Africa. Here we work at ecosystem interfaces to enhance resilience, strengthen biodiversity, water, and food security. I'm looking forward for a really interesting session and would like to hand it back to you, James.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Rodrigo Verwerk, I think, for your all-encompassing and holistic perspective over the triple planetary crisis and the role and positioning of nature-based solutions within that. So now I'd like to also hand over to our second speaker in order to get a US perspective on some of these issues. I'd like to introduce Monica Medina. She's the Assistant Secretary of State for Oceans and International Scientific Affairs for the US State Department. Please, Assistant Secretary.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Of course, thanks so much. What an incredible week of events this is. It's really just an honor to be here. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me. As you said, I'm Monica Medina. I'm the Assistant Secretary of State for Oceans, International Environmental and Scientific Affairs. And in this role, I oversee our U.S. foreign policy on issues related to both water security and nature conservation. It's becoming increasingly clear that we are up against an overlapping crises facing our planet in climate, biodiversity, and pollution. And these threats are disrupting our homes and communities. And in order to address these crises, we have to work with nature, not against her. And at the center of each of these growing crises is that most essential element to life on Earth, water. And that's why the US government has been so active in reorienting its approach to global water security to be more interconnected and interdisciplinary. On June 1 of this year, our Vice President, Kamala Harris, launched the White House Action Plan for Global Water Security, which prioritizes water security as a US foreign policy priority for the very first time. The plan directs a whole of government approach to tackle water insecurity, both at home and abroad. This fall, I'm proud to say that we will have another water strategy to implement this action plan. And this comprehensive strategy will operationalize the plan by directing US government resources and action towards key lines of effort that were identified in the plan and reaching out over the next 5 years. The US approach to water security is expansive and it's expanding. It encompasses our ability to sustain access to and quality of water resources for our whole population, but it also focuses on mitigating pollution and water-related disasters, preserving ecosystems, and supporting an overall goal of peace and political stability. In both the action plan and the forthcoming water strategy, nature-based solutions are recognized as an indispensable approach toward achieving water security. Nature-based solutions are a central pillar of the Biden administration, a recognition of their unique utility in addressing the climate, biodiversity, and pollution crises. And I just want to take a minute to say that we are fully engaged in the CBD process as well, and working hard to reach the 30 by 30 framework, and to do that at home and to help other countries do the same. Unlike in previous years, the newest iteration of our water strategy will better integrate climate resilience into all aspects of U.S. work on water. And in reverse, water security and sustainability must be at the heart of our adaptation programs worldwide. In fact, improving water resource management is one of the most cost-effective ways to adapt to climate change. And finally, achieving water security is critical for realizing our net zero GHG emissions future. To tackle the full emissions footprint, we must improve the energy sector's energy efficiency, expand the use of renewable energy, and encourage more frequent, safe waste collection. Likewise, nature-based solutions across watersheds have significant and critical potential for carbon sequestration, as well as ecosystem restoration. And I can't describe it any better than our previous panelists did. A key element that we're just now beginning to develop in the U.S. to spur the use of nature-based solutions is addressing the question, how much is nature, and specifically in this context, how much is water worth? Currently, our economic system considers water to be, for the most part, a free natural resource to be used and, unfortunately, polluted at will. But ask communities that are water stressed how much they pay to import, recycle, and desalinate their water. Or ask vulnerable groups or women how much of their valuable time must be committed to procuring water and for sanitation. Our natural resources are, in fact, the backbone of our economies, and without them, we would not survive, which is why the U.S. is championing the use of natural capital accounts, which encourage governments to put their natural resources on their balance sheets, the same way we do other economic activities. Moreover, when our natural capital accounts bring water, soil, forests, and other natural assets onto the balance sheet, it enables conservation to become part of economic process, part of the conversation about development, and promotes decisions that preserve ecosystem services as opposed to destroying them. This is an essential step in making the decision between nature-based solutions or hard or gray infrastructure. And the United States is now developing a strategy to support all our federal agencies in including natural capital accounting in our budgets and our programming, demonstrating that our resources, our clean air, clean water, and clean soil, are something to be invested in. Moving forward, the U.S. development assistance interventions will be chosen as part of a full watershed planning process, ensuring robust collaboration of data across sectors and from stakeholders. We recognize that traditional indigenous knowledge and practices are resources for innovation and nature-based solutions. We must keep these communities at the center of our work and be mindful of our duty to respect and to protect their rights. To do just that, the U.S. government is seeking to build partnerships with indigenous peoples and to support their leadership in planning and implementing nature-based solutions. The U.S. government also recognizes that no country is immune from water insecurity. It's found not just in low and middle income countries, but in high income countries as well. And in high income countries, including the United States, water insecurity has been more likely to affect specific regions or vulnerable disadvantaged communities. So even within our own country, where we are lucky to have as much water as we do, we still have incredible poverty of water in certain regions. And this will only get more pronounced as climate impacts intensify. And that's very much helping the US public to understand not only what's happening at home all across our country, but also in other parts of the world. And that's why the US government is increasingly committed to management and planning that includes perspectives from these vulnerable populations, especially women and girls, both at home and abroad. I want to take a minute to talk about one example of U.S. action abroad. It's our work in the Mekong Delta. We have a water initiative, a water data initiative, and it's a flagship program that the U.S. partners with the Mekong region to work towards strengthening the capacity of those countries to collect, analyze, and manage water data to reduce water-related risks, improve regional responses to environmental emergencies, and promote sustainable economic development across water, food, energy, and environmental nexus. And I know we've talked a lot about finding solutions, and this is a place where we're hoping to partner and find solutions that we can then bring to other places. The initiative supports data sharing because of the Mekong Dam Monitor, which is bringing transparency to Mekong Basin-wide dam operations. The monitor is an open source data initiative freely available to the public for use that pairs local knowledge with remote sensing technologies to provide near real-time reporting on water levels and dam operations. And I can't stress enough the importance of community activity and engagement, and this kind of public information makes all that possible. It gives downstream countries the essential water information they need for addressing both local and basin-wide water-related challenges. So to conclude, let me end where I began. In many instances, we know exactly what needs to be done to confront growing water insecurity worldwide. We have the tools, we have the know-how, the innovations. What we really need is the political will, political commitment. To safeguard our planet for ourselves and future generations, we have to address the triple planetary crises of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution by working together and working in harmony with nature. And of course, making all of this work requires partners and partnerships and humility. And we have much to learn in the US. And that's why I'm especially excited to get to do this work and to work with partners from around the world and to learn from people around the world who are already addressing these challenges, who are facing them head on. I look forward to capturing that spirit of innovation and partnership and ambition as we work together with all of you. There's a new conference center in Washington, D.C., built by some of the very same people who sponsor this conference. It's called the Reservoir. And I was struck looking through my pictures last night of a large engraving on the wall that says, "We can overcome the world's water challenges." It sits there right as you walk in, and it I think, inspires everyone who walks in the door that that's exactly what we need to do. And so this conference is the same. It's a reservoir here of willingness, of activity, of ideas, of innovation, of creativity, of partnership, a reservoir. I love that word because it talks to the potential for solutions. And so I just want to say thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this panel. I look forward to hearing the conversation afterwards, and the US is 100% committed to working through the water challenges. We can solve them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary, and also for the reminder, but also for the stark message that what we need is political will. We know what to do, and we know generally how much it costs to do it. We just don't necessarily get the political will to move that needle. So thank you very much to Germany and the US for those points of leadership there. Thank you. I'd now like to hand over to my colleague, my dear friend who I haven't seen for a long time and I haven't said hello to properly yet, to Jenna Gami from Forest Trends.
Audio good? Okay, great. We're so glad you all are here. What a great room. And in a second, we're going to have a great opportunity to get to know each other better in the marketplace, where we're going to be able to get to know some of the case studies that will be presented today, and really dig into these questions of how do we tackle a triple planetary crisis. It's not a small thing. It's hard enough to do one of them. How do we do it when we're really taking into account all of these dimensions? So I have the pleasure of first introducing the folks who will be telling us a little bit about each of the case studies that will be presented or that we'll be able to get to know here in the room and for the folks who are online in an online session. First, we're going to hear about it, about each of the cases beforehand. So first, I'd like to invite Juan Carlos Sanchez to join us up here and tell us about the transboundary water management efforts in the Nile River Basin. Juan Carlos is with GIZ. He's an advisor based in Uganda where he works on the Nile Basin Initiative. He's an international water lawyer with experience in transboundary waters and ecosystems, and he has a PhD in international water law and the ecosystems approach from the University of Dundee in Scotland. Juan Carlos. Do we have the mic? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm actually standing for the Deputy Executive Director of the Nile Basin Initiative. So as some of you know, within our transboundary water management program, through the GIZ, we support the water management at different levels within the Nile Basin Initiative. NBI is having an event right now that unfortunately is running in parallel, so I will be standing on his behalf until Dr. Keys is available. I hope that he will be here with us after 3 o'clock. But what we have for you, it's a very good news. It's a very exciting news. So we're coming with peatlands in tropical landscapes, which is something fairly new. Traditionally, peatlands, which are also known as the most efficient terrestrial carbon sinks, they are or they have been very well studied and mapped in the northern hemispheres. And science was up to certain stage saying that in tropical context, this was not possible. So together with partners from Germany University, Greifswald University, which are key experts on this topic, we have come with the first mapping and also an assessment of how much CO2 is captured in the peatlands within the Nile Basin, which is quite interesting. And the process didn't end up in that mapping of science, but also we have been working together with partners and with the political actors precisely to go through some of the things that we are hearing from the keynote speakers, right? Trying to link wetlands, biodiversity, climate change, even water at the level of high political statements, for example, the NDCs, and bringing those results from that science to really inform this new generation of NDCs that are being developed. So I'm happy to share with you the experiences, not only of the process, but also the results of the science. And I hope that you come and join us and learn a little bit more about peatlands in the Nile Basin. Thank you very much.
Super important. Okay, now we're going to go online. So are we able to get to our colleagues online, hear from them? Meanwhile, I will tell you about the user the next case study is the NEAR program in Zambia, and our colleagues, Mr. Nambuki Bikono and Janice Hunt, will be able to tell us about this initiative. I think we'll hear right now from Mr. Janice Hunt, who's a junior advisor with GIZ Zambia and is responsible for the implementation of the hazard protection measures. And also in line with him is Mr. Nambuki Bikono, who is a former school teacher and executive member of the Muntama Bwinga Water User Association in the Pemba district of Zambia. As a member of the local water user association, as well as a supervisor during AWARE's implementation of integrated watershed management activities, he was heavily involved in mobilizing communities' participation. So let's hear from Mr. Hunt about this case that we could learn more about from Zambia. Please go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Jenna Gamey. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. My name is Janis Hanf. I'm working with GIZ AWARE project in Zambia. AWARE stands for Accelerate Water and Agriculture Resource Efficiency, and it's funded by the European Union and by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. We are working with many partners here in Zambia, including the Zambian government, and therefore we are extremely happy to see also that the Minister for Water Development and Sanitation, Mr. Porsche, is actually present in Stockholm. On the next slide, you can see our project area. It's the Lower Kafue subcatchment in the south of Zambia. And due to climate change, but also human activities like deforestation and overgrazing, the south of Zambia is actually facing quite some serious challenges in terms of water availability. And this puts many people on stress, but especially, of course, the smallholder farmers, as they are, the majority is relying on rain-fed agriculture. So what are the effects of this? On the next slide, please. In the rainy season, we are experiencing flash floods, whereas in the dry season, many of the small rivers, which used to be perennial and used to have water throughout the year, are now drying up completely. And this also creates a lot of soil erosion, leading to huge gullies like you can see there on the pictures, washing away arable land. So the next slide, please. So far, with the communities under the supervision of water user associations, we have implemented 6 integrated watershed management sites through a holistic approach, and we are implementing 10 more sites that are currently being planned. And as you can see on the small sketch on the right, these catchment protection measures actually include a variety of measures, such as building check dams, planting of trees and grasses, but also digging of trenches and soil bands to actually create storage for water. So for the 6 sites that already were implemented, storage for more than 25 million liters of rainwater have been created by the communities, and this one can actually be harvested several times a year. So this increases the constant stream flow, called the base flow in the river, but it also increases agriculture production and fodder production through increased soil moisture, and therefore there's just more vegetation growing in the area. So for everybody joining the session in person in Stockholm, you will later have the chance to play the river basin game, a game and a tool that is used, for example, here in Zambia under AWARE with the community. It's an interactive game to raise awareness on the upstream downstream logic. So we would invite you to come to one of the stands and play it there. And for the participants online, there will be a short virtual field visit with Mr. Likolo, who is a Water User Association member for Mutama Bwengwa area. And he will show you around, so you'll be able to see how these measures actually have started yielding positive results through increased water availability for the local communities, but also increased biodiversity. And you will have the possibilities to ask him questions in the chat. So we would like to have this a bit interactive session. So thank you everyone very much, and enjoy the deep dive at the marketplace.
Thank you very much, Yanis. And we have, you can see in the room here, the board game that was mentioned that we can play during the session. And so I would also like to introduce the third case study, which is from the Sustainable Water and Ecosystem Management for South Africa's Biosphere Reserves. And to tell us about that one, we have Koen Verbist. Dr. Koen Verbist is a program specialist working for the UNESCO headquarters in Paris, where he is responsible for the implementation of the water sciences program, which is called IHP, as well as supporting and implementing interdisciplinary and intersectoral projects in the field of natural sciences. Particularly in Latin America and Southern Africa, he has been supporting the implementation of flood and drought risk management strategies to address climate change impacts on water security. He has led the development of the Drought Atlas and the setup of flood and drought monitoring systems for countries in the region. More recently, he has supported the development of a novel approach to address climate change impacts on water resources and to identify appropriate adaptation pathways. Koen, please go ahead. We see you clearly.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon to everyone. I'll just take one step back and just asking ourselves, NBS are called nature-based solutions, right? So a logical question is, what are they trying to solve? And there may be several questions to that. But one of the issues which we're looking for solutions is exactly the triple planetary crisis. So we see our water resources shrinking, changing, or going out of control, and we're looking for solutions that tick various boxes. We don't want solutions that just solve one problem but create many others. And so in this sense, nature-based solutions have the promise to do better than traditional solutions that tend to do well in securing some water resources, but are not doing so well in other areas and maybe damaging biodiversity and affecting ecosystem services. But we should also not take for granted that mimicking nature will solve all the problems. So we should really make sure that NBS is part of a larger effort. And I think it was also reflected in some of the earlier speakers, in an effort where we truly understand what our current water challenges are at local level, but also what likely scenarios will be for water security in the decades to come. So in this sense, NBS should be evaluated for the efficiency in solving the problems we have identified and compared also critically to other solutions so that their added value is confirmed, but also to make sure that their core benefits really ensure to support ecosystem services and reduce biodiversity loss. And of course, another critical component, which was highlighted also by previous speakers, is the need for stakeholder engagement. If those NBS are not endorsed and supported by local communities, there's often no long-term sustainability of them as well. So that's why UNESCO has been chosen to evaluate and implement nature-based solutions in its biosphere reserve, which is one of the 3 designated areas of UNESCO. And these biosphere reserves are locations where we strive to have nature and people working together in a sustainable way. And in this sense, NBS fit very well in such a setting, and in particular because stakeholders are already engaged to managing their natural resources in those areas. So bring them together to discuss what type of NBS would be most fitting is very straightforward. But we also apply the methodology to evaluate those adaptation actions such as NBS. And in this sense, I would like to also present the climate risk informed decision analysis, or CRIDA, which helps us to identify the water resource challenges, but also aid us to identify how climate change impacts can further impact water security and other areas, biodiversity and ecosystem services. So in this sense, we're not looking at water alone, but trying to look at these triple elements at the same time. As it employs a bottom-up approach, stakeholder engagement is embedded in this 5-step process. And as a fact, NBS are often coming up as solutions that are preferred after using such a multi-criteria analysis. Because also we stress test those solutions and we ensure that proposed nature-based solutions have the likely impact we are looking for. But we also should not forget to monitor and assess those intended impacts of NBS over a period of several years, so to ensure that we understand better how NBS is improving our water resource security while also providing ecosystem services and strengthening biodiversity. So I welcome you all in the marketplace to present 2 cases from Zimbabwe and South Africa, and to further discuss how we can streamline NBS in climate change adaptation work through bottom-up approaches. Thank you so much.
We'll be able to hear about is an integrated WASH and IWRM project in Benin. And I understand our presenter there is not available to present the case in general now, but they will be able to hear about it in the session. Is that right? Okay. In the room, we'll be able to get to know those 3 case studies that we've just heard about. So without further ado, I think it is time for us to get to know each other and get to know these cases. If we could just see, so the first case, which is transboundary water management, Juan Carlos is representing that one. Where will you be located? Yeah, here in the front. I think that's good. Okay. And then Aware Zambia, that will be with Ana Victoria and Ingrid here with where the board game is. And then the third one, which is the Biosphere Reserve in Southern Africa, will be, let's say, where's John? Oh, there. Maybe John, you could go over in kind of this corner, this area. we'll have half an hour or until 3:15. I'll give you all a 5-minute warning when it's about time to wrap up. And the instructions are just to get to know the cases. There will be short presentations and plenty of time for questions and discussion in the small groups, and feel free to roam around to the different cases as you wish. Let's go.
Excellent. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Maroner from the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation. As you may have heard from Jenna there, we're splitting out right now in this segment. And for those in Stockholm, they will be doing an on-site marketplace where they'll be hearing from a few of the different case studies. But for those of you joining us through Pathable and Zoom, we also have a number of case studies here that we'd like to present, a few short interventions and a site visit, as well as some time for Q&A. So we'll be hearing about some of the initiatives taking place in Zambia and in Benin, as well as some work in Zimbabwe and South Africa. And without further ado, I will go ahead and turn it over to our colleagues who are in Zambia leading a site visit. Mr. Namushi Lokolo will be presenting, and then we will also save time for some Q&A 2 or 3 minutes after his intervention. So I would again direct you towards the Pathable platform to post any questions or comments you may have, and we'll be sure to address those. Thank you very much.
Hello, good afternoon. This is Ikolo Namushi coming from Pemba district of Zambia, presenting to you catchment protection measures and the integrated watershed management. You are most welcome to this session, and I would talk about rainwater harvesting. Where we are, there is a billboard showing the activities that we carried out on catchment protection measures and the integrated watershed management at the Mutama Bwengwa Water User Association. I'm a community member, also a smallholder farmer, and also the supervisor of the project that we carried here. The purpose of this project and why Mutama Bwengwa Water User Association with the European Union and the GIZ carried out this project is because of the negative effects of climate change. Zambia, like other countries in the world, have been drastically affected by the negative effects of climate change. One of such are long dry spells, and the other one are flash floods, which have compromised the livelihood of most of our people in our country. Now, the activities this project have embarked on are actually nature-based, in the sense that there is actually no pollution of any nature. And what we have done are simple structures such as construction of check dams, soil bands, trenches, planting of trees, and the grasses. And these have actually been implemented. And the purpose of this is actually to improve water availability to our communities and their domestic animals, to improve soil fertility, also to reduce on erosion, and finally to harvest water to replenish the areas that are very degraded. In the area where we are here, you will actually see that it looks pale. For us here in Zambia, actually our area looks much better because previously this area was more paler than what it looks now. Why? Because of the intervention that we have done. One of the structures that we have actually done is the construction of a check dam. The purpose of this check dam, the purpose of constructing this check dam is actually to stop the runoff water and also reduce on the erosion. If you can see, there's a huge gully here, and the huge tons and tons of soil has been washed away. But with this construction of the check dam, the amount of soil that we lose every year will be minimized, and eventually we shall have water here. And we planted also some trees. Why planting trees? Because we want also to improve our natural environment. We have trees like this one, These are planted trees. We have trees also like this, and like this one. And the purpose of this is actually to counter deforestation. And when these grow, they will actually impact positively on this environment. We have also constructed what we call soil banks or contour bands. The purpose of this is to capture water and to reduce erosion. Now, the water that we capture here sinks down to replenish the underground water source. Now, when the underground water source has been replenished, it means that women will be able to construct or to make gardens, dig shallow wells, and be able to find water for their garden. Apart from that, the trees will reduce erosion. The other things that improve the pasture for our animals. Right here, where I'm taking you, you will actually see these people who are fetching water, which we have harvested this previous rain season. The harvested water here is used for domestic purposes like watering gardens, giving to their animals and the chickens and other things. Now, the source of this water is actually this pond here. Now, you may see a small pond, but this pond was not like this 2-3 weeks ago. But we had a challenge where most of our hand pumps broke down, and over 200 households actually came to be drawing water from here. Apart from that, there is actually projects, community projects such as schools and clinics. This is the source of water where they were drawing water for the molding of such kind of water for such projects. And we would actually like to commend and thank the European Union and the GIZ together with the vibrant community which assisted in the implementation of this project, that this with time, over time, it is actually one of the best solutions to counter climate change. I would like to thank you and invite questions if they are there. Back to the moderator. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That was a really enlightening and encouraging visit of some of the interventions that you all have been doing there. I don't have a question from the chat window, but one thing that I was wondering is we can all learn from some of the positive positive solutions you're implementing there, but we can also learn a lot from some of the challenges that you've had to face and overcome. So what were some of the hurdles or challenges that you've had to address in implementing these nature-based solutions? If you could maybe just provide a short answer on that.
Can I answer? The challenges we faced in the first place was actually community mobilization. That one was in the beginning not understood properly because we didn't do our groundwork. But then over time, we managed to convince the community that the project has actually come and it will yield positive results to the community members. And right now, the community members are commending and they are encouraging that such kind of projects must be replicated around the area.
That's very great to hear that. Yes, sometimes it does take some explanation and really just honest and truthful communication with the community to get their uptake. But once they see the benefits, they can be some of the strongest champions of nature-based solutions and you really need their support. So encouraging to hear that that's taken place there. Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and turn it over to our next presenter to share a little bit more about a case study in Benin. So as you may have heard, the original presenter has fallen ill, but we do have someone to present on the integration of landscape restoration and IWRM under climate change for Benin. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matthias Gures from GIZ. And again, we'll see some information presented from him, and then we'll save a few minutes afterwards for some questions and comments from the audience. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alex. After this very practical implementation of nature-based solutions, we will turn to a more conceptual way of looking at its implementation, its application. Here in Benin at the integrating water resources and landscape restoration. My colleague, who is Tobias Godau, speaker of the sector network on water and sanitation in Africa, and also project lead of AGO in Benin, is unfortunately not here today. I'm substituting him, policy advisor at GIZ for water biodiversity and nature-based solutions. What we're looking at today here is the nexus of water, forests, and climate change. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. The integration of water and land restoration, as well as other benefits of the nexus for the society, challenges and perspectives. So yeah, basically it's two separate projects that are coming together, working on the one hand, integrated water resource management, on the other hand, on forest landscape restoration in the country of Benin in Western Africa. Next slide, please. As you can see on the map at the left side, in the red and blue area, that's the northern part of Benin. That's where those projects basically work together, collaborate, interfere basically with their project areas. The very north of Benin is not too far from the Sahel area and also connected to the Great Green Wall efforts of forest landscape restoration to basically hold water in the landscape in the area and protect the sub-Saharan countries from further desertification. The Benin landscapes, as Benin landscapes are increasingly degraded and vulnerable to extreme weather events related to climate change, we can see the significant effects on water availability, dry spells in farming, and increased risk of flooding. As you can see on the right, the AGO project with a focus on IWRM supports local water committees and sub-basin committees for good watershed management, whilst the Forest for Future project, a global program of GIZ that also works in other countries, supports local population administration for forest landscape restoration, and also in the context of value chain creation. Next slide, please. Yeah, looking at the direct benefits of the nexus, especially on climate change adaptation and mitigation. we see the integration of the National IWM Plan and the National Adaptation Plan to climate change. So also the application of the Paris Agreement within the country of Benin. The establishment of crops resilient to climate change impacts, sustainable soil management practices, and establishing best practices of IWM with an approach focused on strong local participation. As you can see in the bottom, with local community members taking very much part in the practical work, as you just saw also in the projects before in Zambia. Well, the Forest for Future project has this forest landscape restoration effort also based on participatory planning. Alongside the forest restoration, agroforestry, grazing, and natural regeneration are taking place. The value chain development that I mentioned beforehand also is not just based on the forest landscape restoration, but also non-timber forest products to decrease deforestation. The regional overlap is basically in the Panjari and Mikru provinces in the very north, as you saw on the map earlier. And they not just work together to have a thematic connection, so like a cross-sectoral focus, but also for cost efficiency of the projects. Next slide, please. Yeah, further benefits of the nexus also have societal impacts. Next slide. Yeah, building of value chains to create additional income as a basis for long-term social well-being offers alternatives to traditional land uses. It also has a positive effect on the protection of natural resources and local biodiversity by reducing the pressure on the forest reserve and local management of access to water. It promotes local water management, for example, by regulated access and through local water committees. And furthermore, the reinvestment of revenues in protection measures and supplementary income generating measures. As you see on the right, it's basically a circular approach. By planting fruit trees, there's a chance for the local population to have a better harvest. The transformation of products is generating income through the selling of those finalized products. And with that, it's possible to buy further seeds for planting further trees, and then increases this whole idea of forest landscape restoration. Next slide, please. Now coming to the challenges and perspectives. That's also, of course, not always going so easy in cross-sectoral management, as this includes several stakeholders, also on administrative level. So governance is, of course, never an easy aspect when bringing together the several ministries, also on the local level. So weak management capacity of local authorities and administration on watershed level is definitely a challenge. Insufficient regulations integrating climate change. That's also why this is taking place on national adaptation plans to increase this governance aspect or enhance this governance aspect. Increasing need for wood energy and adapted agricultural land is a challenge. Furthermore, the degraded landscapes and increasingly vulnerable extreme weather events related to climate change. Significant effects on water availability, sedimentation of rivers, and increased risk of flooding. The high demographic pressure and limited income in the area, and increasing security threat through spillover from Sahelian countries. Just to remind you, like in the north, there's areas that had just overthrown governments. So it's definitely a challenge to see how to work together in those bordering areas where water is always a transboundary resource. Regarding the perspectives, creating a policy framework for IWM integrates gender and climate change adaptation. So that's definitely a chance to overcome one of these challenges. Implementing those measures in the watersheds raises climate resilience. Restoring forests and productive forest landscapes offers the chances that I already mentioned, like generating better income, having a better perspective. And also what we're working for here is the integration of national and local planning. So restoration plans and watershed management plans that include several nature-based solutions and not just based on one ecosystem or one type of ecosystems, not just aquatic or freshwater ecosystems, but also forest ecosystems, bring those two aspects together. Next slide, please. So here you can see again the larger area and context where the projects are taking place. Unfortunately, Tobias cannot be here today, but we have a colleague of Tobias joining. Ute is in the chat, and if you have further questions that I'm not able to answer from a headquarter perspective, she will be so kind to relate to that and offer you the chance to get a better understanding of how things are taking place in Benin and how this is turning out. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Matthias, for the information and also for jumping in last minute to make sure that we could still hear about this case. As he mentioned, if there are any questions about this case in particular, feel free to post them into the Pathable chat. We do have someone else from the project involved who could answer some of your queries there. I don't have any outstanding comments or questions yet, so I did just want to point out a couple of things that I was really struck by in the presentation. Is, we heard earlier about the need for community engagement, and I thought that diagram demonstrating the value chain was really informative. That, when we talk about NBS, we're often talking about co-benefits, but they're really marketable as something to provide alternative or supplemental income that benefits not only ecosystems, but the communities that depend upon them in the short and the long term. So I thought that was really informative, as well as bringing in the policy perspective, linking those national climate plans and national policies all the way down to local implementation as a means of achieving some of those goals that countries are setting out to do, whether in terms of climate adaptation or the sustainable development goals. So thank you very much for that, Matthias. And keeping an eye on the clock, we'll move to our final case study presentation here. We'll have Dr. Koen Verbist from UNESCO presenting more on some of the work that's being done in Zimbabwe as well as South Africa. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alex. And I'm just gonna start with another title than I was originally foreseen, but it's of course aligned, which is supporting nature-based solutions in Southern Africa's biospheric reserve using a CRIDA approach. And unfortunately, I'm not physically in the area, so I can't show a real-time field visit, which would be fantastic, but you have to do with a few slides from my end. Thank you so much. And next slide. So when we talk about CRIDA, I mentioned CRIDA. So what's CRIDA? So basically, I just want to start with that. So at least we're on the same page. So UNESCO launched in 2018 a methodology called the Climate Risk Informed Decision Analysis to really look at climate change adaptation through bottom-up approach. And the question is now, how is that important for nature-based solutions? Because actually it is a very collaborative process, and I'll make a point why that is important. Next slide. We of course see that when we get to traditional solutions, they often come from problems identified by a certain number of individuals that through a technical analysis provide a solution that then is communicated with stakeholders, which is a very top-down approach to water resource management. But that means also that very late in the game, the stakeholders are involved and that the problems and the solutions are very narrowly defined, often not solving all problems that we're looking at. So when we move to the next slide, we can also, of course, bring those stakeholders much more earlier into the analysis and have a shared vision of what the problems are and also what the potential solutions are. And we can, of course, stress test them and see what solutions actually do solve multiple challenges at the same time. And that's a bit where our approach with CRIDA is aiming for. And next slide. We therefore have this 5-step process, and I will not go in detail, but I just want to include this slide for completeness and for sharing later on, which has a very strong stakeholder engagement phase. And this actually is the way how we come to promote nature-based solutions through such an approach. Maybe next slide. So when Criteria was launched, we held several trainings in the region of Southern Africa. And one of the things that came out of is that biosphere reserves, which already we have 700 of those globally, are identified as particularly well placed to pilot this kind of climate change adaptation processes with bottom-up engagement. And in this sense, 3 new projects actually sparked after that, where we have been mainstreaming nature-based solutions in adaptation planning for water resources management under uncertainty. And I will just give a few 2 examples of that, and maybe next slide. So first one was after Cyclone Idai, and you can still see the traces of landslides that are hitting this region in the back in the simmering sun there. So basically in Chimanimani, after recovering from this big event, displacing thousands of people and unfortunately also affecting a lot of people, there was a need to move towards resilience building. And we used the CRIDE approach to identify how we move away from reactive disaster management, but really going towards how can we plan for the future. So next slide, please. So in this sense, we work together with stakeholders, and we develop this kind of a decision context. What is actually the challenge and how are they connected? So we're looking for causes, effects, impacts, but also the pressures, but in the enabling environment, or also issues which are reducing our capabilities to address some of the challenges. And you can already see this web of connections, which actually indicates that you can't solve one problem without creating others, or you have to solve them simultaneously. So of course, when you have this kind of a more complete analysis and understanding of what's happening, next slide, you can go and look in for what is the impact of projected climate change for that area. And that's actually CRIDE step 2. We're looking at how climate change might actually drive those challenges even further. And here we see the projections for that area. And we see that out of most projections, and especially if we go to the more impactful trajectories, we see that that area is very likely going into a very drier future as well as a warmer futures, with reductions in precipitations of up to 30% towards 2080. So of course, that means that those adaptation actions really need to step up and make sure that water can be retained in the higher up areas. And so maybe if you have the next part of the slide. When we translate that to water provision, I think there's one part of the slide which is not coming up. Maybe if you can just scroll down. Yeah, there you are. Basically, when we look at the area for adaptation options, of course, we need to make sure that those are supporting us to address the increasing temperatures as well as the reducing stream flow, which is a result, of course, of reducing precipitation. Next slide. So one of the, I'm just going in summary, one of the things which came out of those discussions was really through the community ownership to promote check dams in combination with holistic land management, integrating forestry practices, but also the use of more integrated cattle management to ensure that the water which is retained up there can also be used for more sustainable cattle management. So really looking at solutions that optimize the co-benefits for other users, as we said, also to provide benefits for livelihoods, but also for biodiversity, and of course to solve the challenges of water resources. And of course, we have to compare those to more traditional approaches. And in this sense, for some aspects of the crisis, such as extreme floods, we might also need to evaluate other options. For example, in some areas, a large dam may still be needed to make sure that we attenuate the large flows that come out of some of the areas, which might be very damaging. So we have to look for a set of solutions that actually solve the problems we're envisioning now, but also in the next few decades. And then the next case study I just want to highlight, I know we are running out of time, so just very quickly, is a case study from South Africa, where we have another biosphere reserve called the Kruger to Canyons Biosphere Reserve. Next slide. And also there we engaged in a lot of stakeholder engagement processes, really to understand what are the causes, effects, and impacts. And again, here, the interrelatedness of all those elements. And remember, Kruger is a huge natural area which is preserved, but you also have a lot of communities that depend on that for their livelihood. So through those processes, we also went through a stress test identifying which kind of solutions actually might make sense in that environment. That's the next slide. And again, here we see push towards drier and warmer futures for that area of South Africa. And finally, we also evaluating in that context, and that's the next slide, the option of using water funds, and Nature Conservancy is rolling that out in the Kruger Canyon Biosphere Reserve, and we're supporting it through our project in terms of assessing the benefits of such a water fund for that area. So identifying if effectively there is a business case to make for lower lying areas to fund projects upstream to really make sure that the water resource is secured, but also the ecosystem benefits are provided to the catchment, but also to the communities living there. So really looking for the value adding and the return on investment of those nature-based solutions, and making sure that those solutions really support both nature and the communities living in those biosphere reserve. And I think just to finalize, I'm just highlighting that for those interested in to learn more about CRIDA, in the next slide, you can see that we have an ongoing set of trainings, currently already in 4 languages, Spanish, English, French, and Arabic, which will be relaunched in November 2022. So keep an eye on the openlearning.unesco.org platform if you're interested in learning more about CRIDA. And that's my talk. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Koen. Something that I was wondering about earlier, you touched on in your introduction earlier during the session, is that monitoring and quantifying these benefits is really essential. You know, first is getting the buy-in from the local community, and then actually deploying the interventions, but over time really being mindful to set out some sort of monitoring program. And so I'm just wondering if you could maybe quickly speak to some of the efforts that you're considering doing on that to kind of track progress of nature-based solutions over time, and even if they're not deployed yet, the monitoring, how you're working with the community to set up those structures for long-term success.
Good question. Oh, that's a challenging one, and I agree. It's very important, and we have been trying to put that also in our financing proposals to really make sure that those implementation is monitored. Just give an example. The solutions we're looking at here are not new, and some of them have already been piloted in the area. So in this sense, people are telling us like qualitative stories, like, yes, it is improving. It is raising the water level in that and that area. We've seen that, but there's no quantification. It's also very difficult then to really say, okay, these solutions are making a difference. We need to upscale this. So for example, the check dams, we push now for 60 check dams to be implemented across the area, which is of course an investment we could do because of a project that the World Bank was supporting in the area. But those projects have only very limited duration. So they don't really allow for follow-up on how much impact have those check dams on the intended benefits. So there's really a gap there we need to fill. And even when we tried to get additional funding to do that, it was said, yeah, it's not fitting within the scope of this 4-year program. So really there's a challenge there I think we need to address. But of course, having a biosphere reserve, which is a long-term commitment from the communities, allows us to do monitoring. And we need to just make sure that we connect the right people who are able to do that work, and to make sure they can come in and do some of the long-term monitoring of those sites, which I think is very exciting and very necessary to make sure we can replicate, upscale these type of solutions across other basins. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to thank you again, and thank to the other presenters as well for sharing more information about the various initiatives and efforts that are underway in Zambia and Benin. In just a moment, we will be joining back up with our counterparts in Stockholm, who are wrapping up their in-person marketplace. And we'll try to distill some of the key messages from what was being presented here, and then as well as learning what they were covering there in Stockholm. And then Jenna, the session moderator, will be kind of turning our attention forward and presenting some of the upcoming events and opportunities as well, where we can track the progress that's being done around nature-based solutions, whether by countries at the national level or some more kind of catchment-based programs. So I think I'll go ahead and maybe share the next slide, and then we'll wait for our counterparts in Stockholm to tee us back up. In the chat window, I will also be sharing a link for those of you joining online to find some of the resources for each of these case studies. So we have different videos and reports, publications, some site images and things like that. So you can learn more about any or all of the projects that may have piqued your interest. And then importantly, we are also working at AGWA with GIZ to put together a policy brief on these topics, we'll have a link on that website for a draft version. And we're very much open to hearing your thoughts and getting some external review on that. I think my colleague Ingrid will touch more on that in a moment. But again, I want to thank you all for joining in. And we still have another 15 minutes or so of this session. And hopefully in a moment, we will be linked back up to our counterparts in Stockholm. And Stephanie, if you want to stop sharing this slide, I'll go ahead and put up a different set just to wrap us up. It'll have a QR code so that we can, again, provide a link to anyone who wants to learn more about some of the cases. And we didn't, to my knowledge, get any questions in Pathable, but feel free over the last part to share any questions or some announcements, comments, some of the work that you all are doing as participants here. I'm sure many of you are engaged in this space, and we'd love to hear more about some of the projects you're deploying, some of the challenges you're facing, some of the success stories, because there are a lot of commonalities between nature-based solutions in different contexts. And we can hopefully all learn from each other by sharing some of these types of announcements and really building up a community of practice around nature-based solutions for climate resilience, as well as biodiversity benefits and pollution and other sustainable development goals. So direct you towards Pathable for that. And then I think we will be, I just got a message joining up in the next 10-15 seconds with the Stockholm folks.
Great. Well, now we're coming back together. Thanks everybody for getting to know the cases, and I have to congratulate the organizers. It was a very inventive methodology, but I think it was great to get to know each other a little bit more and the cases. So we're going to do a quick wrap up. And as you know, our colleagues who have been online have also had the chance to get to know and ask questions about the case studies through the Zoom. So we wanted to turn it over to Alex Morona from Agua, Alliance for Global Water Adaptation, to tell us about kind of the highlight conclusions that the team online has come up with in their discussion. Alex, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me? I think we're
Yes, loud and clear.
excellent. Yeah, looks like we're getting booted back up there in the room. Yeah, we had a great conversation here in the online marketplace, heard from cases in Zambia, Benin, Zimbabwe, as well as South Africa. And there were some commonalities and real through lines. And what we really heard was that nature-based solutions are being deployed to address a number of wide-ranging challenges that you probably heard about on site as well, from floods to droughts to erosion to water quality and things like that. And through participatory processes, involving local communities, involving local stakeholders, to hear their concerns and to kind of come up with common solution sets and to really get their buy-in, that there have been a number of different nature-based solutions that have been deployed successfully that have provided benefits to not only ecosystems and wildlife, but also to human livelihoods. So, there was talk about really the value chain of nature-based solutions and how it's really a win-win for communities and for local ecosystems, providing support and for different means of income generation and other co-benefits, but really a lot of the climate adaptation benefits that we come to expect from nature-based solutions around, preventing floods and droughts and helping with erosion control and things like that. And that these maybe localized or community level or catchment level interventions are really the means of implementing some national programs. And so there's this linkage between national climate and sustainable development policies and commitments and on the ground work that's, really putting shovels in the dirt and helping countries to achieve some of these commitments that they've put out to, while providing a number of co-benefits and linking up to things like national adaptation plans and otherwise. So I'll maybe leave it at that for now and hear what was discussed in Stockholm, and then maybe we can tease out some key messages and thoughts. Thanks, Jenna.
Super. Thank you. Let's have a round of applause for Alex and team online. So I participated in a few of the groups and have jotted down some ideas on kind of what has been crystallizing for me. And first, I think it's important just to reflect on really what it means to be alive at this moment where, I think it's a lot of jargon on the twin crisis or the triple crisis, and we hear it a lot, but actually it's true and it's new. I read something recently that the majority of greenhouse gas emissions, for example, have been emitted since the opening episode of Seinfeld, right? So in our lifetimes, we're shifting this planet of ours in this dramatically new direction, and really what a special time it is to be alive, because imagine what we can do to shift it just a little bit and actually make an impact for the next 100 years, 200 years, 300 years. And what an opportunity today to get to meet a lot of people who are actually in positions and are committing their lives to be able to do some of those shifts. So I think it's important to really reflect on that and kind of feel it deeply. And it was really interesting to get to know these case studies, because I think on one hand, when we think about these triple crises, that sometimes I'm a practitioner, I work a lot in Peru on trying to scale up investments in nature for water. And when you tell me you have to manage for 3 really hard objectives, is very hard to do, and it can be a bit overwhelming, right? But I think, when we think about this, one thing that I heard really clearly is that sometimes we see really no regrets options where we find synergies among those 3. And so listening to Juan Carlos and the group that was looking at peatlands in the Nile Basin, you see that clearly as peatlands are really critical to carbon sequestration, to biodiversity, to water, and we're losing it for, because we're not really recognizing the value that they play, and we're really just getting to know the value and to map out where this resource is. So it's urgent to be able to do that work and to be able to identify for decision makers where these kind of no regret strategies are and how to help to avoid kind of degradation that's driven by land use change and other pressures. And then on the other hand, we do sometimes have trade-offs. So sometimes we know that, if we're managing, we're talking about a reforestation project interested and, driven by interest in climate mitigation, but of course that could have impacts on water, it could have impacts on biodiversity. And so this game was very interesting because as it was set up to kind of help people to role play with different water users and think about water distribution and try to understand the needs of different water users in a system to find solutions. You could also think about it as a way of kind of a tool to help you to step into the perspective of, managing for biodiversity, managing for climate mitigation, managing for reducing contamination or managing water risks, and think through really from that perspective, what is really needed and what are the opportunities to find kind of mutually beneficial solutions or to minimize those trade-offs. And then at the very least, to be really explicit about those trade-offs and to trust people and to work with trusted institutions to be able to make those decisions as we go forward in a really thoughtful and clear way. And in the case in Southern Africa, there is a real highlight on also participatory processes and on really giving communities options to figure out, how they want to build that future, recognizing the challenges that we're living with. So congratulations to everybody who presented. I thought it was really great mix of cases. And now to close finally the session, I'd like to invite Ingrid Timbo up, who's going to tell us a little bit about what exciting things are coming up that we can look forward to in the same line of action. Ingrid.
Thank you so much, Jenna, and thank you everyone who participated here today. Ingrid Timbo from Agua. So I'm the policy person in the room. Oh, sorry for the camera. Yep. Sorry, everyone online. So I'm always thinking about how are we kind of connecting all of this really good work, this good action on the ground up, because we talk at Agua a lot about bottom up approaches. And here we are. And I feel like in Stockholm, we're way at the top, right? We're trying to make some of those connections here, and some of the work that I do, working with the UNFCCC, working with the UNDRR, other systems at these kind of very high levels, is try to connect all of this really good work on the ground. And so there are big policy meetings coming up that are important to tackling all three of these challenges. So we have, in November, we have COP27, which is taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh. This is the UNFCCC COP, so this is the climate folks. Then we have the Biodiversity COP that's working on the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. And then in early next year, we have the first UN Water Conference, which if you've been here all week, you've been seeing Hank running around everywhere evangelizing about the 2023 conference. So we have these kind of big, and they can feel really intangible, right? And I struggle with this a lot, but these types of sessions and these types of actions are the kind of things that we want to bring to those kind of global policy spaces. And we work in that interface. Jenna works in that interface. Our colleagues at GIZ work in this interface as well. And so we've come together. We're working on a paper that kind of collects a lot of these case studies and practical examples that we really want to share with the policymakers that are in these different spaces. And so we're still working on the paper. The idea is that it will be ready for COP, but what we really need is your input, and we need additional case studies, things that we can bring to these spaces to show what good action is actually happening on the ground. So there is a QR code. You can scan it. You can find a copy of the draft. You can input into it. There are instructions on how to do that there. Also, at that same webpage, there's additional resources about all of the projects that you heard both in the room and online. So we wanted to kind of have a space to collect more information on those projects and share more, as well as contact information for the folks that you saw present here today. So I know we're out of time, want to wrap it up there, but we really want to make sure that this is something that's still going on, because there's so much good stuff that is happening, and we can really learn from one another. So thank you everyone for coming. I want to thank GIZ, Forest Trends, IUCN for co-sponsoring this event with us. And I hope you have a really great rest of your week in Stockholm. Thank you so much.